My name is Madison Clark, and that morning, I stood in front of City Hall, my hands trembling as I held an emergency order to stop my mother from selling the lakeside villa my grandmother had left to me. That house was the only place I had ever truly felt loved, yet she, my own mother, had forged my signature to transfer it to someone else, all just to buy my sister a penthouse. Have you ever been betrayed so deeply by the very family you trusted most that you were forced to stand up against them? If my story resonates with you, hit like, leave a comment, and follow along with me on this journey. Because what happened next will be hard to believe it came from my own family. I can still remember those long summers in the small town where my grandmother Margaret lived, a place where life moved so slowly you could hear the wind weaving through the trees, and the smell of ripe apples lingered around the porch. I was only 8 years old then, while my parents were too busy with work and caring for their princess, my sister Sabrina. I never blamed her for being spoiled, but on nights when I lay alone at home, I couldn't help but wonder if my parents ever realized I also needed hugs, praise, and words of encouragement like the ones they showered on her. Grandma Margaret was different. She never compared me to anyone. Every time I came, she'd meet me at the gate, her wrinkled yet warm hands clasping mine as she pulled me into the kitchen, where a fresh apple pie was already waiting. She used to say, "Madison, you have a good heart, but remember, even family can cross the line if you let them. Don't let anyone take advantage of your kindness." Back then, I thought she was just giving general advice. I never imagined her words would later become my guiding light in dealing with my own family. For 10 summers straight, we gardened together, pulling weeds, planting vegetables, and on cool afternoons, we'd sit on the porch as she told me stories from her younger days, the hard years when Grandpa was away in the military, when she had to hold on to the house and land all by herself. I grew to love every grain of wood, every stone around that lakeside villa, the creak of the floorboards each morning, and the aroma of coffee drifting through the kitchen. When she passed away, I was 29. The funeral took place on a chilly morning, and I couldn't stop crying. I had prepared myself for that day, but losing my greatest source of emotional strength still left me hollow. After the service, the family lawyer invited us to his office to read her will. In a solemn silence, he read the part where she left the villa to me, along with a handwritten letter. "My dear Madison, this house is a part of you, just as it was a part of me. I trust you will keep it as you've kept the memories we shared." My parents smiled then, saying I deserved the gift. Sabrina just shrugged. At that time, she was too caught up in city life, where the lights were bright and the streets never quiet. No one objected. I thought things would always stay that peaceful. In the years after, I worked hard in Portland. As an architect, I earned enough to live comfortably and spent most weekends at the villa. I repaired the roof, updated the plumbing and wiring, kept the old wooden floors Grandma loved, and replanted the apple orchard with the varieties she had grown. Every time I returned, it felt like stepping into another world, far removed from the city's rush. While I was busy maintaining my career and caring for the house, Sabrina lived like a kite with a broken string, changing jobs constantly, jumping from one whirlwind romance to another, and complaining about the pressures of the world whenever a project failed. My parents always sheltered her. My mother would say, "She's sensitive. You wouldn't understand." Every time I asked why Sabrina had quit her third job in a year, even though I worked 60 hours a week and reached big milestones in my career, their reactions were nothing more than a half-hearted "good for you." I'm not someone who demands recognition, but at family dinners, I often felt like an outsider. Every conversation revolved around Sabrina, her new job, her new boyfriend, her next vacation. I would quietly finish my plate and pour myself another cup of coffee. Everything started to shift a few months ago when Sabrina announced she was pregnant. That night, during dinner at my parents' house, she placed a small box in the middle of the table and opened it to reveal a tiny pair of knitted baby shoes. My parents froze for a moment, then hugged her tightly, tearing up as they spoke about the first grandchild and the pride of the family. I smiled and congratulated her, though deep down I worried. Sabrina had never held a job longer than 6 months, and her boyfriend, Evan, I had only met once. After that dinner, I began hearing the same phrases over and over. That one-bedroom apartment is too small for 3 people. Rent is so expensive now. They need a good place to raise the baby. At first, I thought they'd ask me to chip in for a house for Sabrina, like I had helped with so many other things before. But one evening, as I was pouring tea in the kitchen, I overheard my mother whisper to my father, "If we sell the lakeside villa, it'll be enough for a penthouse downtown. She'll be closer to us." My father replied, "As long as Madison agrees to sign the papers." I froze. Grandma's words rang in my head like a warning bell. You wouldn't believe what they did behind my back, even though I'm the legal owner of that house. Leave a comment if you've been through something similar and hit like to help me tell this story. I pretended to walk out and ask for a spoonful of sugar, but inside I was already putting the pieces together. They weren't just considering or suggesting. They had been making real plans. And I knew my mother. Once she wanted something, she'd twist it into being for the good of the family. I had given in many times before for the sake of peace, but this was Grandma Margaret's legacy. That night, I drove to the villa with the radio off, letting the sound of the wind fill the silence. When I stepped inside and switched on the living room lights, the warm wooden walls and the big windows opening to the still lake seemed to watch me. This wasn't just property. This was sweat, effort, and the memories of a lifetime, both hers and mine. I started thinking back on all the times I had been generous. Paying Sabrina's rent when she lost her job, covering my father's hospital bills when he had surgery, even funding my mother's small shop, which she abandoned after 6 months. Not once had they paid me back or even acknowledged it. Maybe because I had always stayed quiet, they assumed I would accept it again. I couldn't sleep. The ticking of the wall clock felt like it was hammering inside my head. The next morning, I called a former classmate who now worked in real estate to ask about ways to protect a property. After listening, she said bluntly, "Madison, if your mom's determined, she'll either pressure you to sign or forge your signature. You need to act first." I knew I had to confront them, but I also knew rushing in could backfire. So I decided to stay quiet, acting like I hadn't heard anything, while quietly making plans. A week after that night in the kitchen, life in the family went on as usual, or at least on the surface. I still came to Sunday dinners at my parents' house, still listened to them talk about the weather and the neighbors, then inevitably circled back to the big topic lately, Sabrina and the baby. That evening, my mother served roast beef, knowing it was my favorite. Once everyone was settled, she started talking about plans for Sabrina's future. Her voice was gentle, but her eyes were loaded with meaning. You know, Sabrina and Evan's apartment is so small, and rent in the city isn't exactly cheap. I nodded, sipping my water, waiting for her to get to the point. "Stavity view of the sellers happened on her oblique. We're just thinking about it. Nothing set," she continued, "but if they had a bigger place, the baby would have a better start." I gave a polite smile, but her words from the other night rang in my ears. My father, who rarely said much, chimed in like he was tossing bait. "The lake house has the perfect space for kids, fresh air, good schools nearby." I set my knife down on the plate, keeping my voice steady. "Are you thinking about moving Sabrina into that house?" My mother gave a soft smile but didn't answer directly. Sabrina, glued to her phone, only looked up when she heard her name. "I think it makes sense. That house is empty most of the time, and she put a hand on her belly, need somewhere stable." I glanced at Evan, who had been silent all evening. He avoided my eyes and kept eating, but there was something in his demeanor that struck me as off. After dinner, I excused myself to step out on the porch for some air. Evan followed, leaning against the railing for a moment before speaking quietly. "Madison, Maybe it's not my place to say, but I want you to know. I never suggested moving into that house. I turned to him, surprised. What do you mean? I know it's yours, he replied, and I respect that. Sabrina is different. She believes our parents will take care of everything for us. I don't want to start a new life by taking something that doesn't belong to me. His words caught me off guard. I had assumed Evan was on Sabrina's side, but apparently he wasn't. That gave me a small sense of relief, but it also made me even more curious. If he wasn't the one pushing this, then who is really pulling the strings? 2 days later, I received an envelope from the bank. Inside was a notice confirming that the property at address has been registered as collateral for loan number. I read the lines over and over, my heart pounding. Even though it didn't say the transaction was finalized, this meant someone had already started the process without my signature. I immediately called the bank branch and demanded an explanation. The representative confirmed there was a file with my signature, along with a copy of my ID. I asked them to send me the scanned documents right away. When I opened the file, I saw my name and handwriting so similar that anyone else might think it was mine, but I knew for a fact it wasn't. A cold wave of anger and shock ran through me. I sat still for a long moment before calling my lawyer, Mr. Howard, who had helped me in a land dispute years ago. When I explained, he wasn't surprised. He just sighed. Madison, I've seen this happen plenty of times. In families, people think everything is shared property, especially when there's a good reason like children or grandkids. But forging a signature is something else entirely, and it's serious. We set up a meeting for the next morning. He looked through the papers and nodded in confirmation. It was forgery. The first step is to request that the bank freeze this file. I'll send the documents today. As for your family, be prepared. Once they know you found out, things are going to explode. I left his office with a folder in my hands and my mind in turmoil. Back home, I sat on the sofa, staring out the window. My whole life, I'd learned to keep the peace and avoid conflict. But this time, it was clear they had gone way too far. That evening, I showed up at my parents' house without warning. When I walked in, Mom was wrapping small gift boxes, Dad was reading the paper, and Sabrina was sprawled on the couch with a parenting magazine. I dropped the folder onto the table. "Is there anything you'd like to say to me?" I asked, locking eyes with my mother. She looked up, momentarily flustered. "About what?" "About the lake house being registered as collateral. About my signature being forged." The room was silent for a few seconds before my father folded his newspaper and spoke in a low voice. "We were just trying to help Sabrina and the baby." The disappointment hit me deeper than the anger. By taking the only thing Grandma left me, the one I've spent time and money to maintain? Mom put down the gift box and walked toward me. "You have to understand, this is for the family. Sabrina needs a place to live, and you? Well, you're not there very often." "But it's mine," I replied firmly. "And I never agreed to it." Sabrina cut in, sounding irritated. "You're overreacting. We're family. Why hold on so tightly to a house you barely use while You want that house," I interrupted, "but you don't want to work for it." Sabrina's cheeks flushed as she looked away. My father stood up, trying to keep his voice calm. "We can talk about this later." "No, Dad, we'll talk about this now. And to be clear, if anyone touches that house without my permission again, I'll take it to court." Mom's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. I gathered my papers and walked out, my heart pounding, knowing that after tonight, things would never go back to the way they were. Driving home, I rolled down the window, letting the cold air hit my face. I thought about Evan, about his words that he'd never pushed for this. I had a feeling he knew more than he was saying. As I passed the lake, the moonlight shimmered across the water. I glanced at the dark silhouette of the house. In that moment, I realized If I didn't act fast, one day I'd come back to find lights on inside, but with strangers living there. 3 days after that tense confrontation, I got a message from Mom inviting me to dinner to talk things through. I knew better than to think this was an innocent invitation. My mother had never accepted losing any argument, especially when she believed she was right for the family. I arrived at 6 p.m. The late fall sky in Portland was gray, damp air seeping into my collar. As I stepped inside, I smelled beef stew and fresh bread, Mom's go-to meal whenever she wanted to set a friendly tone. Sabrina and Evan were already there. Sabrina sat with her legs crossed, rubbing her belly and smiling at me as if nothing had happened. Dad poured wine for everyone, setting a glass in front of me like this was just another family dinner. We started with small talk about work, the weather, and Sabrina's health. I stayed quiet, waiting to see how they'd open the real conversation. Then Mom set down her fork and looked straight at me. "Madison, I know things got heated last time, but if you're willing to listen, I think we can find a reasonable solution." I put my water glass down. "A reasonable solution is respecting my ownership." Dad chimed in, trying to sound diplomatic. "We're not denying the house is yours, but look at the circumstances. Sabrina's about to have a baby. They need a place to start their new life, and you're not there most of the time." I leaned back, glancing at Sabrina. "And your solution is to take the only thing Grandma left me." Sabrina sighed, her tone almost scolding. "You always make everything a big deal. We're family. You should want to help." I gave a short laugh. Helping doesn't mean giving up my rights, especially not through backdoor methods like forging my signature. The room went quiet. Evan set down his utensils and cleared his throat but stayed silent. His eyes met mine briefly, as if to say he understood, but he wasn't about to add fuel to the fire. Mom tilted her head, her voice turning sweet in that calculated way. "Madison, you're a practical person. You know the house is valuable. If you sell it, you'll still get a large sum and help the family. It's a win-win." My voice turned cold. "A win for who? I'd lose something that means the world to me, just so you and Dad can feel good for a while." Dad set his wine glass down harder than necessary, his face reddening. "This wouldn't be the first time families sacrificed for each other. When you were in college, I paid my tuition with scholarships and part-time jobs. I cut in. You didn't sacrifice anything for me. But I've sacrificed plenty for this family, just never by giving up Grandma's legacy." The air in the room thickened. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Sabrina's patience was wearing thin. She leaned forward, hands on the table. "What do you want before you'll give in? Money? Or—" "I don't want anything except respect," I said, enunciating each word. Sabrina leaned back, a faint, defiant smile playing on her lips. "I've already planned out the baby's room. The morning light in there is beautiful." That sentence cut into me like a knife. They had discussed things so thoroughly they were already imagining how to decorate my own house, as if it was theirs. I looked at each face, feeling both hurt and angry. In the next part, I'll tell you how I turned the tables in just 48 hours. Don't forget to hit subscribe and share this story so more people can hear it. My father leaned forward, trying to lower his voice. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. This is a family matter." I stood up and picked up my purse. "No, this is my matter, and I'll handle it my way." No one said a word as I walked out of the dining room. Only the faint scrape of a chair as Evan stood to walk me to the door. He spoke quietly, just for me to hear. "If you need me, I'm willing to testify about what I know." I nodded, thanked him, and stepped into the cool night air. Driving home, I didn't feel as sad as before. The anger had been replaced by something else, determination. They thought I would back down like I always had. But this time, I'd show them I knew how to protect what was mine. That night, when I reached my apartment in Portland, I didn't turn on the lights right away. I sat on the sofa, took off my shoes, and let the darkness fill the room. The only sound was the steady ticking of the wall clock, matching my heartbeat. In my head, Sabrina's words echoed. The morning light in there is beautiful. They had pictured my house as if it had been theirs all along. I knew I couldn't just sit back and see what they would do next. If I didn't move first, I'd lose everything. I opened my laptop and scrolled through my old contacts. One name popped up instantly. Angela Morris. Angela was a college friend, now working at the state office for planning and historic preservation. I called her, and within minutes, her cheerful voice came through the line. Madison. Long time no hear. What's going on? I didn't waste time. Angela, do you remember the lakefront villa my grandmother left me? Of course. Last time I visited, it still smelled like her apple pie. I need your help to get it listed as a historic architectural property, as soon as possible. Angela paused for a moment, then asked for details. I gave her a quick rundown, the forged signature, my family's plans. When I finished, she sighed. I don't want to get in the middle of your family matters, but this clearly isn't right. If the house has architectural or historical value, we can apply for preservation status. That way, any sale or change would have to go through the review board, and that process can take months, even years. I felt a spark of hope. Angela suggested meeting at the villa the next day to take photos, measurements, and note its architectural details. The next morning, I drove out to the lake early. A light mist still hung over the water, reflecting the first rays of the day. Angela was already there, with a professional camera and a folder in hand. She moved through the house, documenting every detail. The intricately carved wooden railings, the custom stained glass windows my grandmother had commissioned. This place has so many original craftsman features, Angela remarked, and it's in a historically significant area. I think the chances are good. We spent the entire morning compiling materials. Before leaving, Angela put a hand on my shoulder. Madison, once we submit the application, be prepared. Your family won't be happy when they learn things are on hold indefinitely. I nodded. I knew, but I was ready to face that. That afternoon, I called my attorney, Howard, to discuss the next steps. He had already sent a notice to the bank to freeze all transactions related to the fraudulent mortgage. But he warned me, this is just temporary. If they try to work around the law or pressure you into signing new papers, we'll need to prepare for a lawsuit. I asked directly. Suing my own parents and sister, do you think I can win? Legally, you have a strong advantage. But winning in court doesn't mean you'll win in the family. His words left me quiet for a moment. Yes, I could win. But at what cost? That evening, I stepped onto the balcony with my phone in hand, ready to call Evan. I wanted to hear directly what he knew. When he picked up, his voice was low and hesitant. Madison, I guess you figured out most of it. Evan, do you know how fast they're trying to move? I overheard Sabrina's mother say they want it done within a month. They've already talked to a family-connected realtor. I tightened my grip on the phone. A month, quick, but still enough time for me to act. Thank you, Evan. And if they ask, don't mention that I already know. I won't. But, Madison, I'm truly sorry I let this get so far. After the call, my heart felt heavy. Evan was still an outsider. He couldn't stop it if my own family was determined. The next day, I took another step, changing all the locks on the villa. I hired a trusted locksmith, asked for high-security locks, and only took 3 keys. Once the job was done, I tested each door, feeling a small sense of relief at the sharp click of the lock. That night, while sorting through my grandmother's old papers in the study, I found a yellow envelope labeled, "For Madison, when needed." Inside was a copy of her will and the deed to the house, along with a short handwritten note. If you're reading this, the house is likely in danger. Don't hesitate to protect it. The way I've protected this family my whole life. No one, not even family, has the right to take what's yours without your consent. I sat in silence for a long time, feeling as if she were right beside me, nodding in approval. The next day, I met with another friend, Daniel, who owned an event planning company. I offered to lease the villa for photo shoots and filming over the next few months. The goal wasn't to make money, but to show that the property was in active use and well managed, not abandoned as they like to claim. Daniel smiled. I'm glad to help. And I'm glad to see you standing up for something that matters to you. Over the following days, I practically lived at the villa. Mornings with photography crews, afternoons with Angela adding to the preservation file, evenings reviewing legal documents with Howard. The constant activity left no room for worry, but I knew this was just the preparation phase. Soon, my family would find out, and when they did, there'd be no more stepping back. One Monday morning, as I was about to leave the villa for the city, Howard called. His voice was lower than usual, without his normal calm. Madison, I just got new information, and you need to hear it now. I froze on the porch, keys still in hand. What is it? Your parents sold a family inheritance property 6 months ago, a parcel in the western suburbs, worth over $1.2 million. They never mentioned this to you, did they? I stood there, the cold lake wind slipping through my collar, and I didn't even bother to pull it closed. No, they never said a word. Howard continued. And more importantly, that money is still sitting in their account, which means they're fully capable of helping Sabrina buy a house without touching your assets. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. A rush of heat ran down my spine, not just from anger, but from the sheer sting of being so blatantly deceived. In my mind, the image of my mother sitting in the dining room, sweetly talking about sacrificing for the family, suddenly turned unbearably bitter. I asked Howard, "Are you sure about the numbers and the timing of the transaction?" "I've reviewed the notarized documents and the tax records. There's no mistake." I sank down onto the porch steps, feeling like I'd just found the final missing piece of a puzzle I never wanted to complete. All the excuses, all the pointed glances toward financial hardship were nothing but a facade. They didn't want to use their own money, they wanted to use mine because it was easier and wouldn't cost them a dime. That evening, I drove back to Portland, my mind spinning. Passing a small street, I noticed the cafe where Evan often worked. For reasons I couldn't explain, I pulled over and went inside. He looked up, a bit surprised to see me. "Madison, what can I get you?" "Black coffee." "And I need to talk." Once the hot coffee was set in front of me, I told him everything Howard had uncovered. Evan stayed silent, occasionally nodding. When I finished, he sighed. I suspected as much. I remember hearing Sabrina's mom mention a big sum from selling some land, but she said it was for their retirement fund. I looked him straight in the eye. "Evan, do you know what they plan to do if I refuse to sign the sale papers?" He hesitated. "I overheard that they'd try to prove you couldn't maintain the property so they could petition the court for control." I let out a dry laugh. That plan would have worked perfectly on the old me, the one who avoided conflict at all costs and would rather give in than cause tension. But now, things were different. That night, I went back to my apartment and spread out all the legal paperwork on the table. I called Howard and told him to prepare every document, proving I had full financial capability and the competence to manage the estate. At the same time, I emailed Angela, telling her to expedite the probate process. The next few days, I lived wound-tight like a stretched wire. By day, I worked at the architecture firm. By night, I drove out to the lake house to check on it and update my files. Sometimes, I'd spot my parents' car slowly passing along the lake road, but they never stopped. One afternoon, while watering the garden, my phone rang. It was my mother's number. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Madison." Her voice was soft but tense. "Can you come home tonight? Your father and I need to discuss something important." "What is it?" "It's about the house, and about Sabrina." I knew this could be the next round, but I agreed. That night, they were already seated in the dining room when I walked in. Sabrina was there too, but her eyes no longer had that defiant glint. They looked tired. My father started, Your mother and I want to be clear. We're in a difficult situation, and I cut him off. You have over $1.2 million from selling that land. Why are you saying you're in a difficult situation? Silence. My mother blinked, then leaned forward.
Who told you that? I found out myself. And I know everything. My father braced his hands on the table, his face flushing red. That's our money. And the lake house is mine, I replied. The only difference is that I'm not trying to take it away from you. No one spoke.
Sabrina stared at the table, her hands slowly rubbing her belly. I stood, picking up my bag. I don't think there's anything more to discuss until everyone's ready to tell the truth. I left, leaving behind a room heavy with silence. But this time, I didn't feel shaky or sad. I felt clear and ready. You'll be shocked when you hear what I did that made them bow their heads and admit they were wrong in front of the entire family. Leave a comment if you've ever wished to see justice served, and hit like to support this story. A week after walking out of my parents' house, I decided I wasn't going to let this drag on in hushed arguments and sugar-coated lies. If they still insisted my property was for the whole family, then it was time to make sure everyone, not just them, knew the truth. Grandma Margaret's memorial was coming up. Every year, the extended family gathered at the town church, then had dinner in the fellowship hall. It was one of the rare occasions when nearly every relative showed up. Uncles, aunts, cousins, even the ones we only saw once a year. I knew if I wanted to expose everything, this was the perfect opportunity. I started preparing. For several nights, I organized all the documents. A copy of the will, the property deed, photos of the house before and after renovations, the forged mortgage paperwork, and Howard's evidence of the $1.2 million from the land sale. Most importantly, I had a recording of my parents talking about not using their own money, just taking Madison's house, a recording I'd captured by accident when my phone was on record in my purse during a dinner a few weeks back. I contacted the church pastor, explaining that I wanted to show a short video tribute to Grandma, along with a few words about her legacy. The pastor had known me since I was a child and readily agreed. I didn't reveal how far the content would go, but he seemed to trust I'd do the right thing. That evening, the church hall glowed with warm yellow lights, filled with the smell of baked goods and roast meat. I arrived early with my projector and laptop. The family trickled in, laughter and chatter filling the air. My parents stood by the reception table. Sabrina sat with some cousins, her hands smoothing the loose dress over her pregnant belly. Once everyone settled after dinner, the pastor invited me up. I walked to the podium, looking out at more than 30 familiar faces. Thank you all for coming to honor Grandma Margaret. This year, in addition to memories, I want to share a part of her legacy, the lake house, and the story behind it. I pressed the button. The screen lit up with black and white photos. A young grandma in a summer dress on the porch, apple trees heavy with fruit, 8-year-old me, dirt smudged, planting alongside her. Then, the images shifted to my renovation process. A new roof, polished wood floors, the original kitchen lovingly preserved. My grandmother left me this home not to the whole family, not as communal property, but to me to care for. But in recent months, I discovered someone tried to take it from me by forging my signature and illegally filing a mortgage. The room stirred with murmurs. I clicked to the next slide. Photos of the forged mortgage papers with the fake signature. The whispers grew louder. My father shifted in his seat, my mother's brow furrowed, but I kept going. And here, I said, showing the bank statement from the land sale, is proof they had more than enough money to buy a house for Sabrina without touching my property. Sabrina's face went pale. She mumbled something to Evan, but I'd already moved to the audio recording. My mother's voice came through clear. Don't use our money. Madison's house is the quickest solution. My father's reply followed. She'll agree. She's never stood up to us. The room went completely silent. I looked around, catching the stunned expressions of my aunt and uncle, and a few people shaking their heads in disappointment. I took a deep breath and spoke slowly. I love my family, but that love doesn't mean letting anyone disrespect my boundaries and rights. My father suddenly stood up, his voice tense. This is a private matter, not something to put on display for everyone. That's exactly the problem, I replied. I've kept it quiet for too long, which made people think this behavior was acceptable. My mother also stood up, her face flushed. Madison, you're humiliating us. No, Mom. I looked straight at her. I'm protecting myself, just like Grandma taught me. Sabrina burst into tears but said nothing. Evan kept his head down, avoiding everyone's eyes. I turned off the projector but didn't step away from the podium just yet. This house still belongs to me, and if anyone continues to try to interfere, I will take legal action. From now on, I hope we can respect each other instead of taking advantage. I walked down to a wave of whispers. A few relatives came over to shake my hand or hug me, whispering, "You did the right thing." My parents left the hall right after, without saying goodbye to anyone. Sabrina and Evan followed, their figures disappearing through the doorway. That night, back at the villa, I sat on the porch looking out at the moonlit lake. Inside me was a strange mix of emptiness and relief. I knew I had crossed a line, from someone who always compromised to keep the peace, to someone who dared to face the truth and speak it, no matter the cost. After that evening at the church, the atmosphere in my family completely changed. No more polite check-in texts or Sunday dinner invitations. My mother stayed completely silent, and my father only sent a short email about his disappointment in my actions. Sabrina chose to make things public in her own way. 2 days later, I got a message from a high school friend. "Madison, have you seen Sabrina's new post?" I opened social media and immediately saw a long post with a picture of me standing at the podium that day. Sabrina wrote that I was the cold-hearted sister who ruined her niece's dream of a warm home, that I valued material things over family bonds, and that I didn't care about the family's well-being. Under the post, dozens of comments from her friends, most agreeing, some even insulting me with cruel words. I read every word, feeling both hurt and angry, but not exactly surprised. I knew Sabrina would try to twist the story to make herself the victim. What bothered me more was seeing a few distant relatives commenting as well, clearly having heard her version. That evening, I was on the porch with a mug of hot tea when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Madison Clark? This is Ben Carter. I'm a freelance journalist. I received some information about a property dispute in your family, and I'd like to hear your side of the story." I froze for a second. "Who gave you my number?" "I can't disclose that," he said, "but I think you should know. If you don't tell your story, someone else will." I declined the interview, but that call made me realize this was no longer just a family matter. I had to be more careful, because anything I said or did could now be twisted. A few days later at work, colleagues began asking about it with awkward concern. A close friend at the office pulled me into the break room and showed me her phone. A video someone had taken at the church, edited to show only the part where I said, "If anyone continues to try to interfere, I will take legal action," and paired it with Sabrina's post, making me look like I was threatening the entire family. The video spread faster than I expected, even prompting a former client to email me asking if family issues would affect my work. That night when I got home, the doorbell rang. It was Evan. He stood there with his hands in his coat pockets, looking hesitant. "I know you don't want anything to do with us anymore," he said, "but I need to talk." We sat down at the small kitchen table. Evan told me Sabrina had spent the whole week telling people I was jealous of her, that I hated kids and didn't want to see my niece have a better life. He admitted he didn't agree with me going public at the church, but he also didn't support turning me into a villain online. "Sabrina's really angry," he said, "but deep down I think she's embarrassed." She doesn't want anyone to know about Mom and Dad selling the land and hiding the money. I looked at Evan and saw the exhaustion on his face. What are you going to do? I asked. I'll try to stop her, but you know I can't control what she posts. I just wanted you to know, not everyone fully believes her story. His words stayed with me that night. I didn't want to wage war with my family online, but I also couldn't stay silent and let the story be one-sided. The next morning, I reached out to someone I knew in the media industry and asked for advice on handling personal crises. She told me, Madison, it's best not to respond directly to accusations. Instead, tell your story clearly and transparently, on your own terms, on a platform you control. I decided to write a detailed post, including photos and documents proving my legal ownership of the house, but I shared it only with a close circle of friends and trusted family. I didn't name Sabrina or anyone else, just explained my journey to protect Grandma's legacy and why I couldn't give it up, even for family. The response surprised me. Many people who had been silent reached out to show support, and even a few relatives who had avoided me before said they understood better after reading it. While there were still some defending Sabrina, at least the narrative wasn't completely one-sided anymore. But then, someone I never expected reached out to me, and it changed everything. Share this story and hit subscribe to follow the next chapter. That person was Lucas, Aunt Ruth's son, my cousin. Lucas is 6 years younger than me, quiet by nature, but always observant. He called one rainy afternoon, his voice hesitant. Madison, could you spare me some time? I think I have information you'd want to know. We met at a small coffee shop near the university where he's in grad school. He arrived early, wearing a dark coat, looking more mature but still carrying the shy air of the boy I once knew. After a few polite exchanges, Lucas leaned in and lowered his voice. I found some documents in Grandma's storage. I'm not sure anyone else knows about them. I frowned. What kind of documents? He pulled a worn envelope from his pocket and set it on the table. Inside was a folder about an educational trust fund, established nearly 20 years ago, listing me as the primary beneficiary. Lucas explained, Grandma set this up in case her grandkids needed help with education, but the terms clearly state, you, Madison Clark, are the sole trustee, and only you can decide who gets the funds, when and how much. I flipped to the last page and saw the current balance, over $500,000. My heart pounded as I read the restrictions. The money could only be used for educational purposes, tuition, books, courses, and could not be spent on real estate or personal expenses. I sat there quietly for a moment, trying to process it all. Lucas continued, I think this is why Grandma always emphasized getting a proper education. If you wanted, you could use this fund for Sabrina's child, without touching the house. That idea gradually became clearer in my mind. I could help the child, my own niece, secure a future in education while still keeping the estate. More importantly, it would prove I wasn't the cold or selfish person Sabrina had been telling everyone I was. That evening, I told Howard about it. He went through every page carefully, then nodded. This is a legitimate trust, with clear binding conditions. If you set aside a sum for Sabrina's child right now, you'll still retain full control, and no one can withdraw it for any other purpose. I asked, if I do this, could they spin it as me making amends for not selling the house? Howard smiled. You don't need to worry about how they interpret it. What matters is your intention is clear, and the legal paperwork protects that decision. 3 days later, I went to the bank and set up a separate trust account for Lily, daughter of Sabrina and Evan, transferring in enough to cover 4 full years of college tuition, plus an additional amount as a contingency for graduate programs if she chose to pursue them. All of it came with a binding condition. Funds could only be released with official proof of enrollment. Once it was done, I prepared an envelope with a copy of the contract and a short letter. Sabrina, even though we have many differences, Lily is still my niece. I want to make sure she will have the best opportunities for education, regardless of circumstances. This is a fund set aside solely for Lily. No one can take it away or use it for anything else. I hope that one day you'll understand why I'm doing this. I didn't send it directly to Sabrina, but arranged to meet Evan at a cafe to hand it to him personally. When he opened the envelope, his eyes widened, then shifted to visible relief.
Madison,
I don't know what to say.
thank you.
Just keep these papers safe and make sure Sabrina understands the conditions. I replied. I'm not doing this for gratitude. I'm doing it for Lily. Evan nodded, promising to hand it directly to Sabrina and explain everything. A week later, I got a brief text from my mother. Tyler delivered the papers. Thank you. No apology, nothing more. But I knew they had received them and understood that I had chosen to help in my own conditional way. News of me setting up a trust for Lily began to spread through the family. A few relatives called, praising me as generous and still thinking of your niece. Those who had taken Sabrina's side were quieter now, perhaps realizing I wasn't as heartless as they had been told. I wasn't seeking praise. The real comfort came from knowing I'd found a middle ground, protecting my grandmother's legacy while still honoring a responsibility to the innocent child caught in this conflict. By the following spring, the air around the lake had softened, and the apple trees in the yard began to bloom with pure white buds. I stood on the estate porch, watching the morning light stretch across the water, feeling a rare peace. Months had passed since I created Lily's trust, and things in the family had shifted, not quickly, not perfectly, but enough for me to notice. That Sunday, I got a text from my mother. Your father and I invite you for dinner. Sabrina and Evan will be here. Lily wants to see her aunt. I read it a few times, certain Lily, barely 3 months old, couldn't have wanted anything, but my mother was using it as an excuse. Still, I sensed a softer tone than before. When I arrived, the smell of fresh-baked pie filled the house. My mother was holding Lily, her expression gentler when she saw me. The atmosphere was slightly awkward at first, but Lily quickly broke the ice. I held her, looking into her wide eyes, and found myself smiling genuinely. Evan stood nearby and said quietly, "She looks good with you." At dinner, the talk stayed on small topics: how well Lily slept, when Sabrina planned to return to work, the new neighbors who had moved in. No one mentioned the estate or the tension from the past months. But I knew, beneath the calm, there were still gaps left to bridge. After dinner, my mother invited me out to the porch. She set a cup of hot tea in my hands and sat beside me. It took a long while before she spoke. Tyler told me about the education fund for Lily. I appreciate that. I did it for Lily, I replied, eyes lowered to the rain-dampened porch floor. I understand. And I realize now your father and I may have been too quick to think about selling the house. It wasn't a full apology, but from my mother, it was a big step. I nodded, letting the silence settle between us. Before I left that night, Sabrina came over. She stood still for a moment, then spoke in a slow, quiet voice. I know about the trust fund. I'm not ready to say much yet, but thank you. I met her gaze and saw sincerity mixed with exhaustion. I just want Lily to have a good future, I told her. Between us, it'll take time. Sabrina gave a small nod and held her baby closer. In the months that followed, the family made more of an effort to meet, but without the old pressure of everyone must be at Mom and Dad's house. Sometimes I invited them to the lakeside estate for lunch in the garden. Sometimes I visited Sabrina and Evan's new apartment, a cozy place they'd bought themselves, with some lawful financial help from my parents. I noticed my parents changing too. They no longer hinted or suggested anything about the estate. Instead, my father occasionally complimented the renovations I'd made, and my mother asked about the apple season or my grandmother's pie recipe. They might never admit their full mistakes, But I learned that sometimes the most important change comes from actions, not words. One late summer afternoon, I sat on the porch with Evan, who had brought Lily over while Sabrina was busy. The baby was crawling now, reaching for the scattered leaves on the wooden floor. Evan watched her and said, "I hope one day, when Lily grows up, she'll know about this, not as a family tragedy, but as a lesson in boundaries and love." I smiled. "We'll let her see it for herself." But yes, she'll grow up knowing love doesn't mean possession. As the evening sun turned the lake golden, I held Lily and looked out at the horizon. A light breeze carried the scent of ripening apples, bringing back memories of summers with my grandmother. I knew her true legacy wasn't just the house, but the strength to hold on to what's right, even if it meant standing alone. And now, I no longer felt alone. I had found a way to keep both the estate and a fragile but real connection to my family. Every family has its limits and its own lessons, and sometimes to preserve lasting peace, we must stand firm in our boundaries, even when it's hard. I believe real love never forces you to trade away your self-respect. What about you? If you were in my position, would you protect your inheritance or compromise for the sake of peace? Share your thoughts. Your story might just help someone struggling to find their own answer. And if you'd like to hear more real, heartfelt stories about life and family relationships, make sure to follow the channel so you won't miss what comes next. See you in the next story.